You are 3 minutes into a task you have been putting off for weeks, and already, without noticing, you have drifted somewhere else. Not to your phone this time, somewhere further away. You are watching yourself in your head, having already finished it. The whole thing done, the relief of it, the version of you who did it. And then you look at your screen, at the actual sentence, the half-formed page, the tiny beginning, and something inside you goes quiet. People will call this laziness. Some of them will call it a lack of discipline. If they are kinder, they might call it fear. None of those words ever quite fit what you feel from the inside. You are not someone who does not want the thing. You want it in a way that keeps you awake. You are not someone who has never tried. Either. You have started many times in many small ways nobody saw, and still the pattern holds. There is something quieter and more specific happening here, something that will not be undone by more force. And it is a strange kind of life, this one you keep going back to, is a private life you cannot leave. Say you decide this time that you will write a book, not a metaphorical book, an actual one. Monday, you open a document. Tuesday, you watch a video about how books get published. Wednesday, you find yourself in the shower rehearsing the interview you will give about the book once it is out. The modest deflection, the story of the year you almost gave up. Thursday, you almost begin. Friday, the document still says 217 words, and you feel oddly exhausted, as if you have been carrying something heavy all week, because you have. You have spent 5 days at the edge of an imaginary future life, designing the office you would work from, picking the first sentence, selecting the acceptance speech in case one is ever needed, deciding what you would say when someone asked how it started, all of it detailed, all of it felt, and none of it visible from the outside, where a person with an unopened laptop simply looks like a person who is not doing very much. There is a way of naming what has been going on here, and once you see it, it becomes difficult to unsee. You have been living with two versions of yourself. Only one of them is allowed out into the visible world. And it is not the one doing the impressive thing. The impressive one lives somewhere else. In a room only you can enter, doing the work that has already happened, being the person who already made it. And you keep going back to that room, not because you are undisciplined, but because the person in there is doing much better than the person at the desk. And it is easier to be with them for a while than to sit with what your real Monday actually looks like. Sloth is too small a word for what is happening here. What is happening is closer to homesickness, for a version of your life that has not been built yet, but that you have already learned to miss. The reason it is so easy to lose an afternoon to that room is that imagined success can deliver something like a preview of the actual reward. Not the full version, not the sustained joy of a real accomplishment, but enough of it. A small, quiet dose to make the visible day feel as if it has already produced something. You close the tab feeling not empty? Exactly. Feeling like something has happened. Nothing has, in any way you could show another person, but something has moved inside you, and your body registers it as a form of arrival. Real work is, by comparison, a downgrade. The first sentence is worse than the imagined book. The first client is smaller than the imagined company. Everything you produce in reality arrives in lower resolution than what you left behind upstairs. There is a specific moment when the pattern reveals itself. It happens right after a burst of clarity. You have a vision. Everything clicks. For maybe 20 minutes, you feel unstoppable. The plan drafts itself. The imagined version comes back with such force that your heart lifts, and you feel something close to pride. Then you try to write the first real sentence, book the first real appointment, send the first real message. The task itself is small, 10 minutes, 200 words, one awkward email, but your attention slides. You get thirsty. You feel low-grade dread that has no obvious source. That dread has a source. What is dangerous is not the effort. The effort is trivial. What is dangerous is the reveal. The first 10 minutes of real work produce something ordinary. And that ordinary thing quietly threatens the fantasy, because the fantasy needed you never to check. As long as you did not start, the imagined version could stay the truth. The moment you begin, it becomes a hypothesis and it can be wrong. And if this pattern holds long enough, something worse than procrastination begins to slip away. Every time you announce something to yourself, I am going to start, I am going to change, I am going to become, and then quietly do not. A small entry gets made in a growing ledger. You may not notice it at first, but some part of you keeps a quiet record. It is learning, one day at a time, that when you speak, you do not follow. It is learning that your commitments to yourself do not have full weight. And so, slowly, without any single dramatic moment, you begin to distrust your own intentions. This is why the plans get more elaborate as the years go on. You are trying to convince yourself. You are laying out something so detailed, so total, that this time surely you have to. But some part of you has already read the file. It knows how this one ends. So the plan is met with a strange, tired resistance that you cannot quite explain. Because a person who does not believe themselves cannot be motivated by their own promises. To the people around you, none of this is visible. They see the surface. They see the unfinished project, the missed deadline, the promising thing you were going to do, and then didn't. And they translate all of it into a small, dismissive word. Lazy. Or worse, undisciplined. Entitled, all talk. Sometimes said out loud, sometimes just implied. What they do not see is how much effort has been spent in a place they cannot look at. You have been holding a vision heavy enough to organize your entire inner life around, and carrying the weight of not being able to make it real. It is an unusual kind of tired. It looks like doing nothing. It feels like running. Being called lazy when you feel this way confirms a small, sharp fear you already had that maybe the version of you in the other room is a comfortable lie, and out here you are just what they say you are. So you retreat further inward, where at least the story of you is still intact, and the loop tightens by one more turn. There is a way out of this room, but not through the door most people point at. The usual answers: more discipline. Waking up earlier, downloading a better system, becoming the kind of person who follows through. All assume the problem is a shortage of force. That assumption is wrong. There is plenty of force. It is being spent inside your head. What actually starts to change things is smaller than you would expect, and stranger. You agree, on purpose, to produce one small piece of evidence. Not good work. Not the finished thing. Just proof, entered into the day, that a real version of you moved. 100 words added to the document that already has 217. 5 minutes of the run. One awkward email. One phone call you have been avoiding. Something ugly and unimpressive and undeniable. Something that lives outside your head. You do not defend it as good. You do not display it. You simply let it exist as what it is. Early. Rough? Obviously not the finished thing, and you do not compare it to what lives in the other room. The first pieces of proof will feel embarrassing. They will look nothing like what you had in mind. That is the correct feeling. That embarrassment is the small price of finally producing something instead of imagining something. It is also, quietly, the entire point. Something starts to happen when you do this a few times. Each ugly little proof is an entry in a different ledger. The one where promises may get quietly followed by promises kept, however unimpressively. And slowly, without any dramatic shift, the distance between the imagined version and the real one stops being a wound. It becomes a distance you are allowed to walk, if you recognize yourself in what has been said here. Laziness may never have been the most useful word for what has been happening. What you have been doing is holding two versions of your life at once, one loud and visible and small, one private and detailed and much better lit, and paying a quiet tax for the difference. The people who eventually make it out of that room do not become impressive versions of themselves first. They just begin to be seen, unfinished, doing something that is not yet what they meant. Something ugly. Something small. Something real. That agreement is where the actual life begins.